Beautiful. Thanks, Lorian. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this May or M365 May session. I already know some of you on the call. This session is going to cover a bit of a story, mainly about how technology supports my ability to volunteer. Volunteer for two organisations in Australia. Now, before I begin, I want to say a big thanks to all the tremendous sponsors that have put their hand up to help out and sponsor M365 May. There is a huge amount of time and planning that has gone into setting this event up, and absolutely could not do it without the sponsors and without people like you as well for attending these events. So I want to say thank you to the sponsors and thank you to yourself as well for attending this. I also would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this online conference is hosted, and the traditional custodians of the land where our Australian-based speakers and participants are located. I'd also like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. So, a bit of an introduction about me. My name is Craig Chiffers. I'm a Microsoft MVP in the Office apps and services space. Been an MVP for just over a year now. Became an MVP back in April last year, mainly focusing on Skype for Business and Microsoft Teams. But as Lorian will tell you, who's also on the call moderating, we fall under the Office Apps and Services banner, which is Office 365 as a whole. I'm also an architect for a company here in Australia called Icon, primarily based in Melbourne, but we're in the process of opening up an office here in Sydney as well. We focus on all things Teams, including meeting room equipment, Teams calling via PSTN, all that kind of good stuff. So anything Teams related, that's what we do. As I said at the start of the call as well, outside of being an MVP and an architect for Icon, I also volunteer. I volunteer with two separate organisations here in Australia, one of which is the New South Wales Rural Fire Service as a firefighter, as a volunteer firefighter. Now, I think the majority of you who've joined the call today are probably from Australia and understand that a very, very large percentage of our firefighters in Australia are actually volunteers. They're not paid to go out and deal with fires. Now, of course, we do have our metropolitan fire brigades, so one in Melbourne, one in Sydney, Perth, Brisbane, etc. All the major areas have them. Those are paid staff. They turn out, they're paid to do what they do. But the vast majority, over 140,000 of us in Australia, both active and support crew and standby crew and the guys that help out in comms, etc. 140,000 of us are all volunteers, which I know does surprise a lot of international visitors, especially when you tell them first time that the guys that are wearing the yellow suits, yeah, they're not being paid to be there. They're not being paid to stand in front of that wall of flames. They're doing it out of pure kindness and wanting to help out. I also volunteer for another organisation here in Australia too, called the State Emergency Service, which is responsible if there's a big storm event that causes a tree to fall down and land on your house, or if there's a big cyclone or flood event that floods entire neighbourhoods and takes power out and causes all kinds of havoc. Also volunteer with them too. So that's the picture of me there with the chainsaw and the axe in the orange. So. And when I'm not doing either of those two things or at work, I try where possible to get out on the motorcycle. So that's a Honda CB650 in the top right hand corner there. I bought that last year. Excuse me a moment, I'm going to have a sip of my tea. I've had a sore throat now for probably about 3 or 4 months, ever since the fires actually. Don't worry, it's not corona. Bought the motorcycle up in Brisbane. Rode it all the way down from Brisbane, all the way back to Sydney. It took 2 days. It's about 1,000 kilometers to ride. So it's a pretty big distance, but the ride is awesome. And I try and get out on good old Rhonda the Honda as much as possible. But at the moment, of course, with everything that's happening, we've got to all stay indoors. That's me in a nutshell. So about the session today, this is an interactive session. Call it a fireside chat. Excuse me. If you have a question during the session, feel free to speak up, call it out, just unmute yourself, jump in, have a chat. Anything that comes to mind whatsoever. It can be related to firefighting, can be related to volunteering, be related to teams. Heck, even ask me a Zoom question if you wish. I can't guarantee I'll be able to answer it, mind you, but jump in, ask your questions, just unmute yourself if you wish. Now, if you do have questions, I'm going to be picking the best questions from today, and you will either win yourself a copy of Adopt and Embrace Microsoft Teams, a book by Paul Woods and a whole bunch of other people too. Awesome book. If you don't already have a copy, get yourself one, and you might actually get a chance to win one today. I also have a Busy Light here as well. This is the newer Busy Light, the larger one. So these will go to the best questions, or in Billy Colosimo's case, who's on the call, the potentially worst joke that he potentially comes out with today. But please speak up. Questions are more than welcome and encouraged during this session. I will also say too that there is a competition that's running by the M365 May organisers, where you can win a whole range of different things, from books to Busy Lights to headsets to vouchers, all different things. If you'd like to take part in that, get your mobile phone out now and point it at the screen. Open your camera app up, point it at the QR code on the screen. That'll take you to a Microsoft form. Fill the form out with your details. It's going to ask you what session you're in. So all you need to do is mention the name of this session, which is how technology supports my role as a volunteer firefighter. Put that in the form, and you'll enter yourself in to win, or as part of that competition, to win a whole bunch of goodies from the M365 May crew. And as I said, if you ask a good question today, or tell a terrible joke, Billy, you may potentially walk away with a Busy Light or a copy of that book. So do speak up at any time if you wish. All right, we're going to be covering 3 topics potentially today, depending on how much time we take. I've allocated about 15 minutes per topic, but again, it's up to you guys what you want to talk about, what you want to hear. So we may chop and chase things around as we go. But primarily, I want to focus first of all on the Australian fire season, what it was like during the season, especially as a frontline member of the RFS, and what we did and what I saw. I also want to talk about how technology supports my ability to do this in the first place. And you'll see that without technology and without partnerships and without communication and agreements, it just would never work. And lastly, if we have time, I want to talk about how you can benefit from what I've learned over the past few months of being deployed on the fireground, while simultaneously trying to still run my home life, communicate with my partner, make sure my pets are still fed, pay bills, etc., and do my work. So hopefully we get a chance to touch on that. But first of all, let's talk about the Australian fire season, because I know some of you are not from Australia, and I'm assuming that a large percentage of what you probably heard was either from social media or from your local news stations. So a few facts for you, first of all. On October 26th, 2019, so last year, a lightning strike in a super remote part of the Wollemi National Park here in New South Wales, which is, if you look at a map, it's northwest of Sydney. So out there, lightning struck the ground, which started a bushfire on October 26th. That bushfire grew to be the single largest fire ever to be known in Australian history to occur from a single source of ignition. It burned nearly 900,000 hectares. Now, to put that into perspective, that's a very large number, right? Like, how big is that? Well, if you take Greater London on a map, so not just inner London, but you draw a circle around where the N25 is around London. Feel free to open up Google Maps now and have a look yourself. Imagine an area probably about 4 or 5 times the size of that burned. The whole lot gone. So houses, businesses, structures, anything that was caught in the path of that, gone. That is an enormous fire. And of course, a lot of the times people say to us, why don't you just put it out? Well, imagine trying to put out something that's the size of 4 times the size of London. I mean, or Greater London, I should say. You couldn't throw enough water on it to be able to put it out, right? You can't throw enough resources at it. You can't put enough aircraft in the air to be able to do that. And so what you see us doing on the fireground is we're not directly attacking that fire because that's pointless. You're not going to put it out. What we're there to do is to protect life and protect property. So first and foremost, life. That's always top of the list. And it's our life first. Always make sure that we're good first of all, because if we put ourselves into a terrible situation, we're only adding to the problem. So we protect ourselves. We then protect others who may be caught up in that situation. So that's, driving in, rescuing people, pulling people out of buildings, pulling people out of sheds, out of cars, etc. It's protecting property. So we're going around and we're putting water on roofs. We're setting up containment lines around properties to try and protect them from the fire. Those of you who are from Australia that here during fire season, please go out and prepare your property. One of the major factors that decide whether your property will survive in a bushfire is how well prepared it is. How much of the area around it has been cleared out, how much of the bush around it is gone, how much of the loose leaves, loose leaf litter, bits of wood, gas, etc., all around it are gone. That plays a massive part in it. So when we're there, that's what we're trying to achieve. Now, of course, my story doesn't start in Australia. My story actually begins over in the US back in November of 2019. So I had just finished up at Ignite in Orlando over in the US, and been spending some time talking to customers about teams, and caught up with a lot of the guys, caught up with Pat Richards, and spent quite a bit of time demoing the team's content capture magic whiteboard for a lot of people there over in the on the floor. If you were there, I'd probably talk to you at some point about it. So feel free to say g'day in the chat if you were there and you saw me. So after leaving Orlando, I flew to New York City and spent a few days in New York City. I'd never been before. It was always on the bucket list of places that I wanted to go for such a long time. I really wanted to see the World Trade Center and how it looked today. Of course, seeing it on the news, etc., and seeing photos of it sort of does it justice, but seeing it in person is a whole different story. And I'd heard so many cool things about New York, and I just wanted to kind of go there and experience the city, take lots of photos. The photo that you're looking at right now, I took whilst I was walking across Brooklyn Bridge. The sun was setting. It was about 3 degrees. It was cold. I turned around and I thought, hey, that's a beautiful shot. I've got to capture that. That's what you're looking at there right now. But yeah, I spent my time over in New York City. I was there for a few days. And whilst I was there, I went into a bar called O'Hara's. It's a bar that's about 50 meters from the World Trade Center site. And it pretty much got destroyed when the towers came down, but it got rebuilt and restored back to its former glory. And kind of turned into a bit of an institution now. It's become this place where people go to, I guess, talk about what happened and experience it. And part of that is when you walk in, if any of you on the call have ever been in there before, you walk in and every single surface is covered in epaulets and patches from all around the world, from all different emergency services. So, in fact, in this screenshot here, you can see that the State Emergency Service, one of the organisations that I volunteer for, there was a patch of that on the wall, and so I took a photo of it. I was amazed, and speaking to the guys behind the bar, they said, "Look, people send us patches from around the world to sort of, say thanks and pay their respects to what happened 50 meters up the road back in September of 2001. I have to say as well, if you ever do go into that bar, and I highly recommend it, you have to ask the bar staff for what's known as the book, in quotation marks, the book. It's this probably yellow pages, for those of you that remember what those things are, a sized book that contains photos, letters, patches, stories, all kinds of stuff that you probably, and I definitely, had never seen before, things that have never been published in newspapers about that day, about the pub, about the people that were affected. So if you ever go to New York City, or if you want to go back at some point when we can do, as I definitely will do, go into Aharas and ask for the book and have a flick through it. It's amazing to flick through it. But when I was there, when I was in the pub, or in the bar, I should say, I sat at the bar and I met the gentleman who's in the lower right-hand photo, who used to be a New York City fireman, no longer is, works in, I think he works in IT now. And we just got chatting, right? And I'm sat there and I'm talking about Australia and what's going on in the news at the moment, about how things have started to kick off. There's bushfires happening. I'm following what's happening on social media. A lot of my friends are sending me photos about the smoke in Sydney, how thick it is. It's pretty intense. And we're sat in the bar, probably having a few too many drinks. I blame him. He was the one buying them. Stumbled home that evening. But I'm sat in the bar, looking up at the TV, and a video is playing on the news. And I'll play this video for you in a moment. But my attention was immediately drawn to the video that was playing, because I noticed the vehicle number in the video was 6008, and that's our what's known as a Category 1 fire truck, and it's ours. It's the one that the brigade that I volunteer with, which is it's Davidson on the lower northern beaches. And I thought, hold on a minute, what's going on here? And I saw, and as you'll see in the video, the truck is just surrounded by flames. Let me play the video for you a second. So some of you may have already seen that footage before. It's been used throughout the world, across the world, all over the place. It's been played at various different stations. I've seen friends in the UK sending me links to it from BBC News, places in the US as well. What stood out for me was the fact that my friends were in that truck, the guys that I volunteer with. Elliot was the guy driving that vehicle. James McCutcheon is the guy that you see in the front left seat wearing the red helmet. Joey, a good friend of mine, is the guy holding the camera, recording that footage. And that was the first time for me, even though I was over 14,000 kilometers away, that was real. That was people that I knew were putting themselves into danger to what actually occurred here, and what wasn't probably admitted in the news was someone had made a 000 call saying that they were trying to defend their property, and they couldn't get out because, of course, they're surrounded by flames. They're stuck. They decided to stay behind and defend their property, which is their choice at the end of the day. And it got too bad, and so they called us and said, "Hey, we need help." And so we've got to go into those situations and try and get those people out. And I remember sitting in the bar and saying to the gentleman, saying, they're my friends in that truck. That's the guys. They're the guys that I work with. Things are not looking good right now in Australia. This was only the start of the season. And of course, at this point, we hadn't lost Andrew and Jeff and Sam down south, the firefighters that we lost during the fire season. And of course, we hadn't lost those guys in the air tanker that crashed as well at this point. So things were already starting to obviously look pretty bad. Those of you from Australia are probably aware of the Fires Near Me service that the RFS offers. In Victoria, it's offered a very similar platform. It's offered by the Emergency Management Department, I believe. In different states, we'll do it very slightly differently. Not sure overseas how it's done, but this is how we do it in New South Wales. So a new fire pops up and it appears on this map, and you can access this map from the web or from your mobile phone via an app as well. Interestingly enough, the back end of this app was built on AWS as opposed to Azure, and it's built to handle 16 million requests every second. Of course, you can imagine a city full of people, a country full of people trying to get information and updates on the fly. It needs to be able to provide that level of information. So really robust, useful application that people quite literally rely on to know what to do next, to know where to go, when to leave, and what to do. So it's critical that app remains accessible, and you can access it anywhere in the world. And so I'm sat there in the bar, showing my friend who's buying me all the drinks what's happening back in Australia, and we're watching it live on TV as well. And and I open up the news, and this is what I'm confronted with, right? Just walls of orange, quite literally, just photos of fire and destruction and devastation everywhere. So I'm pretty keen at that point to get home and do something and help, right? And so that's what I did. I jumped on a plane via LA and landed back in Sydney, I think the morning of November 21st. And of course, for those of you that travel to the US, especially the US East Coast, a little bit more so the US West Coast as well, it messes up your body clock, right? And so you're awake during the night and you sleep during the day. And so that worked out quite well for me. So that evening, a crew needed to be sent up to deal with this fire at Gospers Mountain, this enormous fire that had started in New South Wales. So I put my hand up and said, I've just come back from overseas, but I'm jet lagged and I'm going to be awake all night. So how about I make myself useful and do this instead? Jump on the truck and help out. And so this is a photo of the staging area at Gospers Mountain. It's a few kilometers south of where the fire front is. So the whole idea with this is all the trucks from all over Australia, so not just New South Wales. We've got trucks here from Victoria. We had some Canberra vehicles from the ACT. I think we even had some stuff from South Australia and even Western Australia here as well to help out. You'll notice that the majority of them are red. We like our fire engines in red. Even the Lego one set on my desk is in red as well. Fire engine red. So we all attend the staging area where we grab our kit. We get fed, hopefully. Sometimes they forget about us. We get our teas, our coffees, our waters. We get briefed about what's happening. And then we get deployed in what's known as a strike team. And a strike team is basically a group of vehicles, a group of fire trucks, plus the strike team leader, who's normally in a 4x4 vehicle. And we go off into the bush as a team, as a strike team, and we work on the fire, and we work on the fire all night, all the way through the night. This is a photo that was taken by a fellow colleague of mine. It's somewhere up in Gospers Mountain, somewhere up in the Blue Mountains, I believe, of me putting the wet stuff on the red stuff, as we like to say. The heat that comes off of that is immense. I mean, we obviously have protective equipment that we wear, right? So our goggles, our helmets, etc., our jackets that you can see in the background there. They offer some levels of protection, but for things like your face, along your chin, around here, you certainly do feel the heat through there, right? And there's a lot of heat coming out of there, especially if it's eucalyptus oil that's burning. They like to sort of go pop in the background, which is can make you jump if you're not expecting it. Of course, the other danger that we have here is falling trees. It's pitch black. The only light you've got is from the fire itself. You can't see where you're walking. There's the noise of the fire, the noise of the truck engine and pump behind you. You're effectively, running towards the fire with a hose to try and protect whatever's around you. And it's very easy to fall into a hole and injure yourself, or fall over, or put your foot into a pile of ash and end up with ash inside of your boot, and you end up burning your boots. Or so many people on the fire ground, they trip, they put their hands out in front of them, they're not wearing their gloves, and of course they touch something hot and they burn their hands, and then they're useless, right? They're useless both fighting fire and for everything else for several months. So, but falling trees is a huge problem on the fire ground. You don't get any warning. You hear a crack, you turn around, and the tree's already on the ground next to you. I remember Joey, the guy who filmed that video, and we were out protecting a property, and we were walking along this track, and I heard a crack. I turned around, and Joey's probably 3 or 4 meters behind me, and a tree literally landed between me and him, just bang, right between us. And the only reason we saw it is because I shone my torch at it on the ground, and I could see, oh yeah, that's a tree. So that's probably one of the biggest problems that we have is if someone could somehow develop some kind of app that could predict what tree is about to fall over, that I'm sure that would certainly help. We have busy nights on the fire ground. We do a lot. We try and get a lot done. It is planned where possible. Of course, if it's an emergency situation and we come in and we just need to put water on the fire until it goes out to protect properly, that's what we'll do. But where possible, things are planned. Those of you who don't know, we actually light a lot of fires as well. So this is a picture of me holding a what's known as the drip torch. It has a mixture of petrol and diesel inside of it. If it was pure petrol, it would just go poof, and that wouldn't be good. And if it was pure diesel, it would be a little bit harder to light. So we add a little bit of petrol to it just to give it that little bit of oomph to get it going. And we light the end, which is known as the wick, the black bit at the end there, and we drip fuel all along the ground. And we do that to light the bush up. Now, of course, you're probably asking yourself, why on earth would you light more fires when there's a huge fire going on? Well, we do that to create containment lines. We do that to burn the bush and the fuel on the ground and in the trees to ensure that when the fire front, the main fire, gets to it, it's got nothing left to burn. And so, of course, we hope that it burns itself out. That's the plan. Of course, many things can go wrong with that. If you burn too much at a time, and of course, this is back when the bush was really very, very dry and would just go woof the moment it was lit, things can get out of control. If the wind changes suddenly, things can get out of control. If the wind gust picks up, and it throws embers over your containment lines that land in trees behind you and catches them alight, which can happen again. Things start getting out of control. So you can see very quickly how just a simple thing such as a wind change or wind speed can really drastically affect not only us and our safety, but the safety of everyone else that's working around the fire, and it also affects the plan as well and what we're doing. Now, of course, whilst all of this is going on, so I've worked all night. On the fire ground. I've come back in the morning. I'm looking at my phone because we've come back into civilization, and my phone has it started lighting up like a Christmas tree, right? Because for 12 hours I've had no cell phone coverage. The towers in the area have been destroyed. The only comms that we have is via radio, and even that can be patchy in certain areas. And so I've come back into civilization, and my phone's lit up like a Christmas tree, and I'm getting SMSs from Lee, my partner, who's saying, are you okay? Where are you, etc. Because she's worried because she hasn't heard from me. And I look at my calendar and I'm like, hey, I've got a call in 5 minutes, and I'm an hour away from home. I'm in the back of a fire truck. It's too late to cancel this call. We've left later than we had planned to. We were meant to be back at home by 8 a.m. that morning, but as you know, plans change. And I'm in this situation where I've got a customer call in 5 minutes, and I got to do it. I need to be there. And so I decided to pull out my mobile phone and fire up the Teams app and connect to the call. Simple as that. I dialed in. I had mixed expectations, thinking, I've got pretty patchy 4G coverage here at the moment, but it worked, and I was really, really, really surprised. I'd seen the presentations back a year ago at Comms vNext from Microsoft, who said we're working on technology to enable teams to work in areas where you get up to 50% packet loss. And I was like, that sounds good, but maybe it's a sales pitch. Turns out it was actually quite true. It worked flawlessly. I didn't have any problems whatsoever. In fact, the person I was speaking to didn't know that I was in the back of a moving vehicle on a fire truck, in a fire truck. My headphones in my ears, they weren't admittedly Teams certified, but anyways, I had to make do. I ran the call, made some notes on the app in OneNote, and sent an email, and that was it. I did what I needed to do. And because of that, that gave me the confidence to continue to say, I can still go out at night and I can still firefight, and I can still do that and help the community out, and I can still do my job. I can still answer emails. I can still take part in conference calls. Doesn't matter where I am, I'm still able to do that. So if for some reason we are caught on the fire ground by an extra hour and I'm not able to be home at 9 a.m., it's 10 a.m. instead, my 9 a.m. meeting is not affected. I'm all good. The technology has my back. And so this is what my meeting room looked like a lot of the time during that time, in the back of a truck. Admittedly, when there's 4 people in the back there, it gets a bit tight. I'm not the smallest of blokes, so I take up a bit of room. But that was my meeting room right there. And I mean, what's the issue with that really, right? Apart from noise and maybe network disconnections. But the reality is today, we don't always have the luxury of being able to sit in a room like this with, heating and comfy chairs and proper displays and proper internet connections. We need the technology to come with us and enable us to do what we need to do when we need to do it. And every single time that I use Teams to join calls, be it from the back of a fire truck or from a coach, because we took a lot of coach trips backwards and forwards between Sydney and wherever the fire ground may be, wherever the staging area may be. A lot of times it was 4 or 5 hours south of Sydney. So we take coaches 6, 7 o'clock at night, have a bit of a nap on the coach, and then work all night, and then jump back on the coach in the morning. Normally swing by Macca's and get a coffee or a tea and some food, and then back on the coach it was, back home. And there were so many occasions where I would sit there on the bus listening to meetings on my phone. In fact, embarrassingly, and I can see that the boss is on this call, I actually fell asleep for a few moments on one of those calls, just because I was so knackered from what was happening the night before, from working the night before. But it goes to show, right? Like, and hopefully I didn't snore on the call. I'm sure there's a recording out there somewhere of me snoring on a call. Look, the technology enabled me to do that. I could sit there on the bus and I could call into these meetings. I could take part. I mean, look, I was probably tired, so I probably wasn't much use. It enabled me to do it, which is exactly what we need in today's busy world of people wanting to do various different things. I just want to touch on that a little bit more. Just keeping in mind as well, we've got about 20 minutes left of this session. Does anyone have any questions before I continue at the moment? If you do, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in, or just punch something into the chat if you can see the chat, and I'll read it out for you if you like. I'll just pause for a moment. I'll have another sip of my tea. Victoria asked, was the Office 365 conference number used in these calls? No, it wasn't. I literally opened up the Teams app on my phone and I joined the call using 3G/4G. My initial thoughts, Victoria, was if the 4G network did drop out, I could always rely back on just an audio call. I never needed it. We're pretty fortunate enough in Australia here, and I'm using a carrier that's sort of synonymous with Australia-wide coverage. And especially along the highways and the fire trails, coverage was pretty good in most areas. As long as the towers hadn't been burnt out, it was good, it worked. And so just simply using 3G and 4G got me through. But having that ability to fall back and use that dialing conferencing number was always good to know, because it's always good to have a backup plan, right? All right, in the interest of time, I'll move on for a moment, but just want to touch on technology and me. So we've kind of already spoken about it a little bit, but I use a lot of apps in my daily life, both professionagly and at the RFS as well, and the SES too. Two of the main ones we use at the RFS are our paging system. So some of you may be aware that back in the day, pages were all the rage. Not so much anymore. Some of our crews still have them. The RFS does maintain its own paging network, believe it or not. But we actually use an app now that runs on your iPhone or your Android device. It works exactly the same. And so when a fire call comes through, it'll ping in our app and it'll give us the address information. And then we can say if we're responding to that call or not. And if we do say we're responding, our little name pops up on a map for everyone else to see, and it shows how far we are away from station. And so the crew leader, when they get to station, can look at the map and say, oh, well, we've got Joey, Craig, Chris, John. 4 of those people are 5 minutes away. Craig's 20 minutes away. We'll wait for the 4 people to arrive, and then we'll go. And then we'll send Craig a message saying, we're going to go, you take another vehicle. So it enables us to communicate and plan even before we get to the station. Whereas before with a pager, the pager would go off, you jump in your car and you'd go, and no one would know how long you were going to be. So just a simple ability of being able to say you're responding and then see where everyone is on the map is super, super beneficial. Speaking of maps too, one thing that we used down in Balmoral was the Emergency Plus app here. We use that, so you can get that Australia-wide. I highly recommend you install it on your phone today. What it does is it gives you your latitude and longitude, where you currently are right now, as well as an approximate address location. Now, where this is super useful is if you're driving and you come across an accident or something, or you need to call the emergency services, this app will give you your exact location that you can give to the operator on the phone. Now, of course, in a city, you can just look up a cross street, but if you're out in the bush or if you're away from civilization, how do you know where you are? You could be 10 or so kilometers from the next cross street. So this app and it works offline too. Will give you your latitude and longitude that you can give to the 000 call taker and show where you are. Now, we use this when we were walking around. Have a think about why for a moment we would use an app like this. I'll give you a clue in the next picture that I took. This is from the fires down south in Balmoral. We went in just as the fire front had come through, and you can see obviously the destruction had already happened in the background there. Power was out across the entire village, so we were going through and checking to make sure that everyone was okay and putting out fires that were still affecting properties. Show you this next photo. Now, this might be a bit confronting to some of you who are on the call. This was taken down in Balmoral, just south of Sydney. Many of these images sort of surfaced on the news, particularly of this area that got absolutely smashed. In fact, that's an understatement. But this photo should give you a clue as to why we use that Emergency Plus app. So we use it to find an address of somewhere to actually report it as still standing or destroyed or partially destroyed, or if we need to call in additional help. You imagine walking down a street, your reference points are house numbers and street names. But what happens if you don't have a house number or a street name anymore because the sign has burnt and gone? And Google Maps isn't working because the mobile phone towers are out. You've got to rely on street maps. You've got to rely on where you are. You've got to rely on old school GPS. And so we use that app that would give us an address location of where we were currently stood. So we'd stand outside of a property and we'd open up the app and we'd see that we were outside of 8 Smith Street, and we'd call that in over the radio and say, this property has been destroyed or this property is okay, for example. But just being able to have that information to hand helped a huge amount in being able to find people and locate people and find where we were as well. So if we needed help, we knew exactly where we were at all time. Craig's asked, did you have a dedicated GPS on board, and does it have some sort of live updates feature? So each truck does have its own GPS. We have a handheld GPS that we use inside the trucks. And we also do have satellite navigation inside of the trucks too. That actually runs on an iPad that's mounted inside the truck, and it has offline maps on it. So if we do need to find our location, we don't need to rely on the cellular network. We can use that to locate our information, and we can cross-reference that with UBDs that we have in the truck as well. So they're paper maps. Some of the older people on the call will probably remember UBDs, books that are this thick that used to flick through. Well, we still use those in the fire service because you can't guarantee that you're going to have batteries and coverage wherever you go. So those things are still useful. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. When we were there, we got to meet a lot of animals, a lot of really, really nice people who had been affected in many ways, right? But they still wanted to help out. They still wanted to put their hands in their pockets. They still wanted to bake us cakes, bring us drinks. People were amazing, and so were their animals as well. This was a photo of a puppy. We just finished sorting out this guy's shed that was still alight. We got a 000 call early in the morning and said, we need to go out to this address and sort this person out. So after putting the shed out, the guy turns up on his motorcycle, and off hops this 3-legged dog that was very, very happy to see us, very happy to receive pets, and really wanted to play. And so, good fond memories of the people that we met, even in disastrous times. It seems to bring out the best in people, which is great. And so many thankful people, so many animals as well that just wanted pets, wanted pats. I've got various photos of animals that we helped out. Vaguely, I actually recall some geese that we gave some water to that we came across in the middle of a paddock that had completely burnt out. But for some reason, the geese were in this enclosure that had been completely untouched, and the geese were absolutely fine in there. All they needed was a bit of water, so we gave them a bit of water, and they were super happy. So it's a good feeling knowing that we're helping people and animals out at the same time. Craig's also asked, what sort of personal tech do you carry when you're out of the truck? So mobile phone is in my pocket all the time. A torch, always a flashlight. I've got various things on my jacket that I carry. I've got there's a jacket in the corner here. I've got a flint that we carry, so we use that to light if we need to. I've got face shields and masks in here. I've got tools in here to open up standpipes and hoses. We carry a radio as well, because it's important that we obviously make sure we remain in contact at all times, and a GPS at least as well. One of us might even have an iPad as well. We try not to venture too far from the truck, because that's where all the equipment lives, all the hoses, first aid kits, etc. So if we need to get to that stuff quickly, it's always at hand. The maximum length that you can sort of run hoses from the truck is several hundred meters if you wanted to, but again, you got to bowl them out and then you got to roll them back up afterwards, right? And you got to get the water there too. So yeah, we try and stay as close to the truck as possible. Also, it's not always possible to get water either, and that might sound strange, but it's entirely possible to run out of water. Our trucks only carry a certain amount of water, and at full pressure, that can only last a few minutes. And we need to make sure that there's enough water left in the truck to protect us in the event of a flashover. That's when we get stuck, and you know the flames come over the top of us. We have to get in the truck, put our helmets on, our flash shields on, and goggles, get down below the window line, and we turn our spray protection bars on. But we've got to make sure we've got water left for that. And water's not always available in towns as well, right? If you're trying to get 50 or so fire trucks pulling water from the street at the same time, you're not always going to get pressure. So you got to take that into account as well. Victoria's asked, what kind of phone have I got and does it overheat? I've got an iPhone. It does overheat if I leave it in my pocket and things get too hot. I do leave it in the truck as well sometimes. I was using a Samsung Galaxy as well, but I've now switched to just the iPhone, because in all honesty, carrying two phones is just a major pain in the ass. Keeping two phones charged is a pain. So yes, just the one phone now, but it has two SIMs in it. So I've got my work SIM and my personal SIM in there as well. So I just want to cover briefly as well about staying in touch with people. Just aware that we've about only got 10 minutes or so left of the session. So this is a photo of my partner Lee, and she's great, right? She is brilliant. She's not listening to me, I don't think, at the moment, but she was. I've been earning myself brownie points, but she's very supportive, and I seriously couldn't do what I do without her. And of course, she has a right to know as well what's going on. I mean, things when the fire pager goes off, I don't always have time to send her a message and say, hey, fire pager's gone, I'm jumping on the motorcycle, I'm riding to station. Sometimes things just happen and I don't immediately, I'm not immediately able to keep her updated. So we have kind of figured out a different way of keeping each other up to date. One of those ways is we've invested heavily in technology in the house. You cannot walk into a room, and to prove a point, there's actually one sat on the desk here as well. Every room in this house is controlled either via Google or Alexa, sometimes both. All the bulbs in the house are all smart. There's cameras all through the house. The pet feeder is automated. The front door is smart. Everything that runs this house is smart and is accessible from the internet. That means that if I get caught short and I need to go and deal with a fire and Lee is stuck at work, I can feed the cats remotely from my phone, or I can check up on the house. My neighbor has a key, so if something does go wrong, they can come in. They can just put their fingerprint to the door and open the door up, and away they go. Everything that exists in this house has been designed to assist us in running the house even when we're not here. So I can turn the air conditioning on and off remotely. So when it gets hot for the cats, for example, I can turn the air conditioning on and not be concerned that they're going to overheat. The other thing, though, as well, is about keeping each other up to date and ensuring that we kind of know where each other are, where we are, and where what's happening in each other's worlds. Now that's a challenge, right? Because I use Office 365. Lee uses Gmail, and I tried to bring her across to Office 365, but she likes Gmail, and I'm not going to fight that. So I let her use Gmail. That means, of course, that we have two different calendars, two different systems that need to be synced. And if we don't invite each other, it becomes a headache. And so instead, I set up a sync between my Office 365 calendar and the Google Calendar. What that does is it pulls my calendar information from Office 365 and puts it in the Google Calendar, which Lee then has access to, and also every single smart device in the house also has access to. So when I wake up in the morning, I can say, "Hey Google, what's on my calendar today?" And she'll be able to access my Office 365 appointments using that sync. Lee can do exactly the same thing too. She makes a change to the calendar, it syncs across to my calendar. So instead of saying what's happening this evening, we already know what's happening this evening because it's in the calendar. Of course, you do have to get into the mindset to add the details into the calendar. That certainly does help, but it ensures that we remain in sync and we always know what each other are doing most of the time. We use some other things as well. I'm a big fan of AnyList. We use that for our shopping list. So regardless of where we are, be it in the grocery store or elsewhere or in the shower, I can say, "Hey Google, add muffins to shopping list," and Google just lit up, so she's going to add muffins to shopping list. And Lee will get a notification on her phone that I've just added muffins to the shopping list. And it's one list, it's synced, everyone has access to it. There's none of this, "Oh, what do we need from the grocery store when we get there?" I'm coming home from a shift and I'm going to swing by Coles or Woolies or wherever to pick something up. I can just open the app up on my phone. I don't even need to ask Lee. It's there and I know what I need to buy. Simple as that. If I do need to communicate though with Lee, I use an app called Zello. It's like a walkie-talkie app. It's real-time audio, so if I need to ask her a super simple question, I'll just fire up the Zello app and just ask it. She'll do the same thing for me as well. So instead of SMSing that might not get her attention, if I need something urgently from her, fire up Zello and away we go. Super simple. Just looking at the time, we've got about 5 minutes left. Lastly, just want to touch on how you guys can take advantage of what I've learned so far and how you can enable this for your users and how you can get the best out of the technology in your daily life, regardless of whether you volunteer or not. Firstly and foremostly, though, I really want to point out that everything that I do in my daily life is a direct result between communication, trust, understanding from my employer, ICOM, from my partner, Lee, at home, and the fact that we use Office 365 for work. Without those three things working in harmony, I would not be able to achieve the things that I am able to achieve by using that. So if I didn't have Office 365, I wouldn't be able to make calls from fire trucks. I wouldn't be able to, update calendars from fire trucks. I wouldn't be able to do as much volunteering as I do today because I'd be stuck on antiquated email systems, probably using laptops and VPNs, and it would be really hard to get things done. If my employer wasn't so understanding and enabled me to work from home and to do those additional things and understand that sometimes I start work at 10 and finish at 6, and other times I start work at 7 and finish at 4, and there's some give and take there, I wouldn't be able to do it. And lastly, if I didn't have the support network at home from an understanding girlfriend of Lee that allows me to do these things and supports me and keeps the household running when I'm not here, who buys into the technology and what it can offer her and us to be able to keep our daily lives running, allow me to pay bills, keep the lights on, basically. If there wasn't buy-in at home, I'd find it just as challenging as if there wasn't buy-in at work. And so those three pillars for me are vitally important. If one of those falls over, I wouldn't be able to do what I do today. And so just on supporting your people, I really, really think that these three sort of critical areas are areas that where possible, you should focus on to enable your workforce and your people to do what they do best. And that's, first of all, let people work where they want and wherever they choose to and when they want. So don't force people to come into an office or a building and sit at a particular desk to do what they do best. If they want to work on a Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m., let them do that. If they want to work on a Monday evening at 9 p.m. To finish something off, let them do that. Support them in that. Give them the tools to be able to do that. Don't force their hand and don't force them to have to be in a particular place at a particular time to achieve a task. Imagine how difficult it would be in my daily role if I was forced to come into an office every day to attend meetings. I wouldn't be able to do what I do. Of course, it's important too that you train your users how these tools work and equally what to do when things go wrong. So I knew that if 4G didn't work for my meetings, that I would have audio conferencing to fall back on. I know that because I'm a Teams MVP and because we've rolled it out in our organization. Are you sure that all of your users know that they can do that if you've licensed it? Maybe they don't know that. So make sure that people are aware of how the tools work and what they can do with it. And lastly, make sure that the tools don't get in the way of productivity. We see it time and time again. We see people with VPN forcing connections via the corporate network to access Office 365. They've got to use two-factor auth from a VPN token that they've lost, so they've got to call the help desk. They can only dial in between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. They've got to go into the office to be able to make a phone call to a colleague. All of these restrictions that are put in place that at the time seem to come across as, oh, we're just doing it for security reasons, but maybe reassess those. Are they really that necessary these days? Do we really need to force traffic via our corporate network? There's nothing wrong with users accessing Office 365 via their own internet connection. In fact, it's recommended. It bypasses your corporate network. It bypasses your need to have that level of control over that data. Your data's in Office 365. You should trust it. So make sure that your tools support people rather than getting in the way. And it's important as well that people are kitted out properly. Now, I mentioned, of course, that I was using the wrong headset for that Teams call. Pick one from this list instead. Make sure that you're giving your users a great experience with Teams, right? So in an ideal world, I'd have had that Plantronics Blackwire 7225 or something similar like this, for example, right, on that bus in the back of the truck. Would have given me fantastic audio experience. Of course, it doesn't always work that way. One thing to point out too is I have a copy of those Jabra Evolve 65s. I've got them in my drawer here. They're useless in noisy environments. So again, just because a device is on the list doesn't mean it's necessarily it's going to work in a particular scenario. So keep that in mind too. Just because it's on the list doesn't mean it'll always work in a certain scenario. Of course, if all that fails, you can always buy us coffee, right? Firefighters love coffee. There's nothing like a warm or a boiling hot cup of coffee after a really long, hard shift to kind of wash everything away and restart again. Now, does anyone have any burning questions? I'm aware I'm 1 minute over already, so Lauren's going to shoot me. But if anyone has any burning questions. Nope. Cool. Don't forget to scan that QR code if you would like to enter the M365 May competition. Now, that's separate to the competition with these two. I'm going to be going back through the chat afterwards to pick the best questions from the chat, and I'll pick who will win those, and I'll reach out to you individually if that's okay, just to let you know that you've won. All good. All right, coming up next, Steve Nutston is going to be talking about collaboration for community organizations. I want to say a huge thank you to M365 May for having me. Do check out my blog at blog.chiffers.com, and you can add me on Twitter at @cchiffers. Thank you very much, everyone.